Okay, next up with circles, we're going to start trying to find the area of them. Okay, right, this involves a formula that's less easy to kind of prove, so we're just going to go ahead with it. To find the area of a circle, it is pi multiplied by the radius squared. Okay, so you've got to be careful with a number of things here. It's different to circumference because it involves, it's a different formula for one, but it involves radius this time as opposed to diameter. But similar to what we were looking at when we were looking at the circumference, as long as we've got one or the other, we can work out the other through the formula. Diameter is just 2 times by the radius. Okay, so for this one, if we rearrange that, obviously the radius is just going to be half of the diameter. So depending on what we're given, this is the formula that we need. We need to use the radius, but if we're given the diameter, we might need to half it in order to find the radius to be able to use the formula, okay? But the questions take much the same kind of form. We're going to be given a circle, like so, and we're going to be told, in some instances at least, we're going to be told a radius. So let's start with this one. This is 6 meters. Okay, and if we're asked to find the area, then we need our area formula. Okay, so similar to all other shapes, with all the shapes that we've done so far, each of them has a different formula for area. Okay, this one is no different, and as long as it has a different formula, then we need to use that. Okay, we need to make sure it's nice and clear in terms of our working, and we need to make sure we've got the right dimensions. Okay, so it's pi multiplied by the radius, right? So we check this shape. Do we have the radius? In this case, yes, we do. So we're going to take that radius and we're going to square it. Okay, so you can write this next line if you want to. It just depends on your calculator. But basically, we're going to do pi times by 6 times by 6, right? If you've got a calculator that's got a squared button on it, then you don't obviously need to do that. Okay, but obviously if you've got a kind of a more basic calculator, and if you're using your phone and you're not turning it round, okay, then you might not have the squared button as easily. So you just got to remember what we're doing when we're actually squaring something. If we're squaring, we're timesing it by itself. We're not timesing it by 2. So this basically becomes pi times by 36. However you do it, you should get an answer of 113.097, blah, 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 okay? So once again, we're going to round to 1 decimal place. This would be 113.1, and it is in meters, but because it is area, it is meters squared. So whatever the unit is in the question, it's squared, because remember, for area, it's the unit squared. We're basically dealing in little square meters. How many of them can we fit inside this shape? Okay, right, so a different circle this time. Whoop. And this time we're going to be given this length here. And obviously it is slightly different. It's not necessarily what we want it to be, but we're going to bash on anyway. So let's call this 30 centimeters. Right, so we're trying to find the area. So we're using our area formula. A equals pi r squared. So we're going to take our pi and we're going to multiply it by our radius. Very specifically radius, not just any number that we pick, not just any number that's there for us. It has to be the radius. So the 30 centimeters there is a diameter. It's not the radius, so we can't use 30. Okay, and it's not the fact that if we square something, we times it by 2. I've just told you that it doesn't work. So we've got to work out what the radius is first. So using this formula at the top here, the radius is just half of the diameter. So if that's the diameter, half of it is 15. And we square 15 and then times it by pi. So in your calculator, you can literally just go pi times by 15 squared. If you've got a calculator that allows that, either that or do pi times by 15 times by 15. You don't have to write this step, but I just want you to know that that's what we're doing here. And when you do that, put it in your calculator, 706.858, ... Round it to 1 decimal place, 706.9. This was in centimeters, but because it's area, it's centimeters squared, okay? Right, so then the last kind of shape that we might come across is something like this, okay? And what we've got to realize that a shape like this is basically what it is. And the majority of the time in the question, it'll tell you what this is. This is basically a quarter of a circle. So you might have the fact that that's a right angle, which tells you that this is 90 degrees. And obviously we get 4 90s in our 360 degrees of a circle. But the bottom line is this is just a quarter of a circle. Right, so we've got to be careful in terms of the dimensions that we're given here. So we perhaps be told that this is, what do I want to use? 9 millimeters. Okay, so this dimension here is 9 millimeters. It's perhaps harder to see because we don't have a full circle. But what that dimension there is the radius. Okay, if I was to extend this circle and make it a full circle, it looks more like a square, but you get my drift. then this point here would be the center, in which case the line that's measured, the 9 millimeters, would indeed be the radius of the circle, okay? So we can take that and use it for our area formula. So A equals pi r squared, in which case it's pi times by 9 squared, okay? However, all the while we're doing this, we're remembering that we're not finding the area of a full circle, okay? Because what we'd be doing here, by using this formula and not changing anything, is finding this whole area. Now, that's not what we want. We just want this area. And we've got to think about what that area is in relation to the full circle. And of course, it is just a quarter. So at the end of all this, once we've stuck this in our calculator, so pi times by 9 squared is just 254.469, and when we round that, it'll be 254.7. However, as I say, that's the full circle. So the final thing we need to do with this is split it 4 ways, divide it by 4, okay? So when you calculate, you can just divide that straight away by 4, which will give you 63.617. Now, I've done that with the unrounded version because that's what's in my calculator, okay? And that will give us a much more accurate answer. So I can round it now, and that will give me 63.6. It was millimeters in the question. Even though it's a quarter of a circle, it's still area, so it's still squared, okay? So all these little things that we've just got to remember when we're dealing with circles. It's not necessarily always a full circle, but the formula that we use, A equals pi r squared, will give us the area of what would be a full circle with whatever radius we put in. So in that last example, we've just got to be a little bit careful, and at the end, divide it by 4.